Hola guys, thanks for joining me for the fifth episode in the Daredevil TV journals. I just watched, and this episode will be filled with spoilers for the Daredevil Netflix series episode 5, World on Fire. And first of all, I love that title. I love how they, because obviously the explosions and everything, the world is starting to burn, but also it plays into how Matt describes himself seeing. And it shows you just a little bit of an effect of sort of how he kind of perceives the world. How with all of his other senses put together, he can almost make out a sort of sensory image of the world. That has to do with everything but light. And so World on Fire is just it's a wonderful title, and it continues with the Daredevil's themes. First of all, I'm happy that we finally got some specific information about how Daredevil's powers work. Because of course you know that he's blind, and because of the accident, all of his other senses got supercharged. But even then, you think, okay, so he can hear well, so he can feel better, I guess, so he can smell better. How does that make him a superhero, really? How does that ultimately make up for and surpass his inability to see? And his monologue about how he's like a sensory machine. He can like feel distortions in the air, and that helps tell him where people are. He can feel when the temperature goes up and down. His balance is so much better because all of his senses are working on overdrive, not just like the 5 or the 4, I guess, with him not being able to see, you think of, but everything that gives him a clue about his surroundings. He's just hyper aware of everything going on except for light, and that was really neat. And I'm happy that they finally pinned it down. But I think it was a smart move to save it for a little till they had you in, because it's kind of intriguing trying to figure out exactly how his powers work. And up until the fifth episode, we didn't really understand exactly what was going on, even though we had a good idea. Claire and Matthew falling in love. It came out of not necessarily nowhere. Like, now that I look back, I see how like they fit with each other. But I guess they were doing so well at avoiding the typical TV love stereotypes, maybe. Like, the cheesy things that you normally see. Since they didn't use any of that stuff between Matthew and Claire, I didn't really anticipate that this is where they're going. I knew that they were good friends and that they cared about each other, but I didn't see them going this particular route. But it's not a bad decision, at least not yet, in my opinion, and it's working well, and it fits well in the story that they've set up. So, we'll see where that goes. Now Fisk, I know that they're trying to paint him as having he's very much a creature of emotion, but I'm wondering if they aren't making him a little bit too sensitive, at least appearing, because I definitely understand them. The way they're setting up, they want you to understand what his motivations are. They want you to almost be able to root for him. Well, that's what makes a good villain, is for you to be able to understand his drive. And make you almost question, like, are we really doing the right thing by taking this guy down? Or at least, give you food for thought about it. But he's not really that intimidating. He's a big guy, and he killed a guy. But other than that, I'm like, okay, are people really scared of you? Like, would people, if somebody was stuck alone in a room, well, I guess if one person was stuck alone in a room with a guy, that they'd be scared. But you get the feeling that any of the other henchmen could go toe-to-toe with him and beat him up. And he doesn't really feel like his personality doesn't feel like he exudes intimidation. Certainly not like, use another superhero example, like Bane from The Dark Knight. That guy is intimidating, just the way he talks, the way he moves. Fisk is not, and maybe he doesn't need to be, but it's just sort of throwing me a little bit right now. We'll see where it goes. I mean, definitely he's much more. If you just go by what he does, he's very intimidating, but his personality is not. And speaking of what he does, the scary thing in this is the police corruption. This is where we finally understand why Daredevil can't go to the police or the courts necessarily, or at least not all of them, because Fisk has so many of them in his pocket that it's super dangerous to try to trust anybody in the authority at Hell's Kitchen. And you feel like, okay, well, isn't the world where S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers, like, exist? Couldn't he go to them? But, I mean, if they're taking care of threats so high up, and this threat is, I mean, if you look on, like, the global scale, it's so far down. But he's still got to deal with it. He can't necessarily reach out to these higher-ups for help, because they are busy, you know, fighting the bigger fights. But, so he's sort of very alone. And I didn't think they could do that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and make it feel natural. He feels very isolated and very alone in his fight, Daredevil does, despite the fact that these other heroes exist. And I'm just happy to see I'm kind of blown away a little bit that they could do that so well, make him feel so isolated, but he's still in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It makes the universe feel bigger for it. So that's just neat. Side note, I am really happy that Foggy isn't a useless character. I fully expected him to be the bumbling sidekick who is basically just there to make Matt look good by how dumb he is. But no, he's a competent lawyer. He's got a heart. He's helping out this old lady with her plumbing, and him and I can't remember her name, but blonde chick have a really good friendship and possibly romance going on, and his dedication to his work, his relationship with Matt, it makes me happy that Foggy's there, and it makes me want to see more of him. I've not seen a character yet that I just didn't want to see any more of in Daredevil. Well, if I did, they're characters that were only in one episode and I haven't seen since. So I'm happy that the side characters are really good in this show. But even though back to Fisk, even though he isn't super intimidating, you can see how dangerous this guy is. He's very manipulative, and he's played the Russians against Daredevil without like even really having to do a whole lot. He's wiping out his potential enemies before they can realize what's going on, and that is scary and that is intimidating. Now, this is kind of a two-parter, or at least seems to be, with the next episode, episode 6. So I will try really hard, even though I usually like to space these videos out, to get episode 6 up right after this one, or just maybe a day or two after this one. So, with that said, click here if you've missed any of the previous Daredevil TV journals, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.